Okay, I was just gonna do a quick update here on the 68 because Nathan and Dakota actually came over and we got a lot done on this thing. I got a thing caught on me. Starting at the front, got this wire mesh that Nathan brought over, put on here. Just kind of doubled up 2 layers of it and it's zip tied in there. And I just kind of fogged some black paint over it so you won't be able to see it as much whenever the grill's on it, but this is to keep rocks and bugs and crap from damaging the new radiator. Moving over here, trans cooler lines are hooked up. I went to the auto parts store and bought some line that you can use with ATF. Every connection I've done like this on this truck where it's a rubber to metal, I flared the metal hose and then just torqued the crap out of the hose clamp, so I don't think anything will come undone. We will see about that though. And right here, you can see the overfill. I'm not sure, in my head this works, but overfill tube, it runs down, it's zip tied down to the cross member so it can't go anywhere. Runs over here to the reservoir, which is in there pretty solid. It's just one bolt holding the mount there, and then to support the other side of the reservoir, since it's plastic, it's just another hole bolted up there. Just a piece of angle iron that I cut and had Dakota slap some paint on. Power steering lines. Power steering lines are hooked up. If I can find a flashlight. Okay, so power steering lines. And the high pressure line is made to go on the back side of the pump, like how this one is right here. But on the Tahoe, I don't know if you can see that, but it's actually right there. It faces towards the front of the vehicle, which means you can get it on and off without having to pull the pump, which is really good. But I had to tweak the hose a little bit to get it where I actually wanted it without it rubbing on the drag link. And then there's the low pressure hose, and I bought a filter to go on there just because this power steering box did come out of the junkyard. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The fluid that was in it came out clean, and it did have the hoses on it. Those 2 hoses right there were what were on the box, and they were both bent over. So I don't think anything got in the power steering box, and again, the fluid that came out of it was clean. Got all that done. Fuel system, there's the original fuel lines for the Tahoe. I ran those under the frame. You can see them coming up right here, where I ran to, where's the light? So right there, there's the electric fuel pump. So there's the electric fuel pump running to this aluminum hard line that I just got from from LMC. I really like this. It bends really easy. It's easy to form. I just kind of tucked it up under there. There's a factory bracket. No idea what it was for, but it's holding the fuel line. I zip tied it all together so it can't move. That plastic is there just to keep the frame from rubbing against it. Got the sending unit in there. Everything but the wiring is hooked up for the fuel system. There's the rest of that hard line. So fuel system is good. Right there, we got the brakes hooked up, got that rubber line in, and that little T-fitting. I actually had to go buy an AutoZone because that rubber line I bought was for a 68 GMC, and this differential came from God knows what. Probably a 80-something C10, if I had to guess. But so I had to get a different fitting to adapt that rubber brake line to this differential. So that got done. Oh yeah, and then this. So we got the brakes hooked up, the front brakes too, although those hoses took a little bit of help. The calipers, I ordered them for a 73, but I guess they weren't exactly a 73. We had to machine the ends there, round them off a little bit so that they would fit. There's that line. And they're really long. I'm not sure why they're so long. There's that one, which I think is still leaking a little bit. Dakota tried his best to get it to not leak, but I think it's still weeping a little, and I'm not sure why. I'll have to clean it up and see if it's got some rust or something on it. But Okay. So, since we actually had the brakes hooked up, and we could put some fluid in it and actually see if it would build some pressure, which it did. We got it to build pressure. I wanted to see how good of a seal we had everywhere, because if I was going to break something, which I was thinking I was going to break a seal, blow a seal, I wanted to do it while it was in here in the garage. And so I grabbed the dash right here with both hands on either side, put both feet on the brake pedal, and pushed on that thing as hard as I possibly could. And I didn't blow a line. However, I did bend this, which is unfortunate. So it bent right there at the threads, right at the end of this nut. I'm not sure exactly why it did that, other than it just had a lot of force on it. But I'm gonna have to find a way to strengthen that up. But again, I wanted it to fail. If anything was gonna break, I wanted it to break here and not while I was driving in when I needed it. And because it wasn't as clear in the other video I made, here is the shifter, or more of the adapter that I used to convert the 3 on the tree to run the 4L60E. So up here, it's just a little brass piece of, I don't even know what it is, some kind of brass bushing that I bought from Lowe's. And it's a loose fit, because a loose fit is the only way I could get this to work without binding up, because of how the angle of the steering column as opposed to the angle of the bracket here. And the very top of the bracket, so it's the original shift cable from the Tahoe. And then this right here, that was the original bracket that held the shift column from the Tahoe, and I just drilled the welds out and broke it off. And then it goes into a big piece of gas pipe, and I just kind of, I wish I had a picture of it whenever I was putting it together, but it's just a piece of plastic that supports that rod, and it kind of concerned me just because it being real thin plastic. I was afraid it was going to break, so I packed some rope real tight around it in that pipe just to kind of give it some structure. And down there at the bottom, where it's clipped on, it had this kind of like little shoulder joint that was originally on this bracket right here, and I cut it off, welded it to 2 nuts, and that's how I connected the trans cable up. And then that piece of 3/8, just part of the same material that I made this out of. And I just hooked it all up like that. And so whenever you activate it, it pulls the trans shift cable down and then sucks it back up. Because that was the problem with this, is if I would have just hooked the trans cable up right here, with the trans cable going down this way and running to the transmission, part would have been all the way at the bottom of the steering column, and first gear would have been all the way up at the top like how it is now. So that's just a little bracket I made to convert the 3 on the tree column to run the 4L60E, and frankly I'm pretty happy with it. It seems to be working good. I mean so that's park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, 2, and 1. And the more I mess with it, the easier it grabs first gear. First gear is a bit rough for it, just because... There goes a wrench. Just because of the angle that it has to grab, because this is starting to pull away by the time you get it down into first gear, but it does grab first gear pretty easily. And if I, like that I didn't have to pay $900 for a steering column, that's also pretty nice. So that's how I did that. Now I gotta figure out how to strengthen up this master cylinder. And for this 3 on the tree adapter, probably the biggest thing safety wise that I did is right here is where the selector goes to grab these little notches on the shift forks. And I made sure it was all the way up against this first one, because this first one was the one I decided to use. And I welded it all the way around so that there's no way that this can become disengaged from this fork. So if you go, so you can't accidentally, you know, grab this fork which isn't hooked up to anything whenever you go to put it in park, and then the truck roll away or something like that. So welding that up only allows this fork to move, and it doesn't let this fork be disengaged. So welding that up is definitely critical in doing this. Okay, so this is how I decided to strengthen it up a little bit. I left both of those two nuts on there like how they were before, and I had this little piece of pipe that had this other crap on it. It was part of a bracket from an edger that I had laying around, and it slid perfectly over those nuts with a little bit of help from a hammer. And so once I got it over both of the nuts, I just welded it all up. So that should prevent this thing from bending like that ever again, because everything else is going to be all tied up against each other now. There's not going to be a whole lot of thread showing. There's not going to be a whole lot of places where it can bend now. So that should keep that failure from ever happening again. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this and then put it back in. Oh, the temptation. Kidding. Okay, so I had to take the master cylinder off again because, well, after I welded the first part, I put it all back together, slammed my foot to the floor, and I bent it again, which is the little bit of thread that was left. So I just welded the whole friggin' thing up. These collars are now welded to this pipe. It's to the length that I need, and it's still adjustable on this end and this end, but I just left it the same length it was whenever I took it off the master cylinder, and then I just straightened it up and welded the whole thing together. And no, they're not good welds, but granted, I've just kind of been self-teaching myself. That right there is not too horrific, but that's what I did. Is I just welded the whole. It's one piece now. I still left the all thread in the middle there, but if it breaks again, then I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't see how this could break again. I mean, it seems pretty stout now, so I hope that it'll hold together. Okay, so after some work, I got the brakes finally buttoned up. This was leaking just a little bit here, and I got a wrench on this and a wrench on this, and I was able to torque it down to where it's not leaking. I don't think the front is leaking, as far as I can tell. So well, it's really dark, but that hasn't broken yet. I got in there and, again, both feet grabbing the dash and just pushed down that thing as hard as I could. And I even just with one leg held pressure on it for about 2 minutes, and as far as I could tell, there was no noticeable drop in pressure. So that at least is good. This fitting right here that I got from AutoZone, it's really shallow, and this line had a kind of a shoulder on it where there wasn't any thread on the end of it, and I had to cut that off so I could have enough thread there to thread into that fitting, because I found out it was loose, and there just wasn't enough thread there for it to get a grip, which is why I had to break the line open, which is why there's freaking fluid everywhere. But once I cut that off, it got a good grip on there now. So all that's hooked back up. And I mean, I know there's air in the line because we never bled the front, and now the back has air in it, but I mean, after about 2 pumps, it gets pretty solid. That's about as far as I can push it. So, brakes at least are probably good enough to drive for now. I'll probably still bleed them, but I imagine after a couple 100 miles, these caliper seals are going to start leaking, and these rear drum brake seals are going to start leaking because they're over 20 years old and they've never been used. But I'm not going to go chasing down problems that haven't happened yet. So for now, it's just going to stay like that.